Oh, wah. Pura vida, mi gente. Pure life. How you guys doing? Appreciate you guys being here. Much love and respect. Shout out to everybody in the live chat right now that's here on time. On time. Everybody that comes in, whatever time is on time. Pura vida. Yeah, calm yasharala. Yeah. Kum. Kum, right? Kum. Kum. Yes, yes. Welcome, welcome. So we're gonna get back into a book we've been reading. Pretty interesting drops we've been getting. We've been pulling out some babies. We dodged a lot of hijack. I like how the author the way she thinks, especially in the 1940s. Like this is very controversial. It'll probably be seen as pseudo. Um, but a lot of the correlation that mentioned is things we've already investigated and kind of things that will kind of show and prove to us, America's a true old world, and so we've done a lot of topics on a lot of things that is mentioned throughout the book, and I kind of like it, like the one we read, Researches into the Lost History of America. That one was a pretty good one, and The Shadow of Atlantis, and all these books we've been reading completely. So it's not just one person's perspective, but we pull out again the babies, we pull out the drop, the diamonds, whatever you want to call it, and you got to dodge some of the hijacks because this is a lot of times there is a lot of personal interpretations of the what she's finding, right, or what he or she, right. So again, this book is America, the background of Columbus, in a survey of the revelations of science with respect to the Western Hemisphere and its peoples before its unveiling by Columbus. By Jen C. Wise, BSBL, MA, all the titles, right? And Virginia Academy of Science, part of the Virginia Academy of Science, and American Association for the Advancement of Science. So it's not just like supposed to be a scientist, right? So she has her or him, he has his way of scientifically trying to, I guess, write this, right? We're gonna go to a certain page, but before that, make the previous drop on this book, the previous reviews, readings for educational purposes under fair use, all the previous chapters we've reviewed for educational purposes. So I got the whole playlist ready for you, in case you are new to the channel or you've missed the previous readings of this specific book. I have many playlists on different books we've read and, different topics. So check out all the playlists, but just go to my playlist tab and you'll find this one right here. So specifically with the book we're going to read today, again, we're going to get back to another chapter. We've got a lot of drop from this book and many other books. We piece together the puzzle. All right, we use our discernment, mama, that wisdom. Wow. Wow. All right. We're gonna put a song. Shout out to all my people in the British Isles, my followers there, or not follow. I don't like even saying follow, I like the people that like to learn, that watch these videos, in British Isles, especially in Ireland. Shout out to my boy Pete over there in Ireland. Really good person, ancient Phoenician also. So we're gonna add a song called Celtic Enchantment Mystical. I'll be playing this a lot. I purchased this on pawn5.com. They're not paying me to say that. All right. Just set the vibe, right? And we go to page 211. Hold on. And we go to chapter 9 of this book. We got the vibes going. Yeah. Can you guys see? Can you hear me? Oh, wow. Pura vida, mi gente. Let's go. Let's see. That's all good, Signs. I got you. Let me know if the music's too loud, guys. If you can't hear my voice. We're in chapter 9. It's called The Phoenicians, the Gadhelics of Ireland, and Brutus, the true cross of Solomon, the symbolism of Rome, the Iroquois. Huh. Rome, Iroquois, Laos, Solon, and Nebuchadnezzar, Jeremiah in Spain and Ireland, Pythagoras and the Druids, the origin of the Scandinavians and Normans. Whoa. Now that's a pretty long title, right, for a chapter. I couldn't fit it all in the description of the video. It's too long. So I try to put whatever I could, how do I make that into an image? Think about that, guys. How do I make this whole thing into a thumbnail? It's very hard, but I tried, like I'm trying to hopefully, it kind of shows a little. So it says here, patriotism. What crimes have been committed in its name? Nevertheless, in the Mosaic age, just as present, it was necessary for nations to have heroic histories at any price. For it is human nature that each race, each nation desires to see itself in a fine light, even if this be at the expense of others. Wow, we know that very well. We're just reading about that in the other book, the one I read to you guys out loud, An Indigenous People's History of the United States, I read part of it, was that Saturday? Shout out to everybody that was there. You know how it's become the way, right? That blueprint, how they took over the Indians, is the blueprint they use throughout the world, especially US, right? From the disillusioning picture of Israel given in the preceding chapter, it is readily understood why the Hebraic scribes undertook the political religious reasons to conceal and at the same time preserve the unsavory record of their forebears. So when they're saying Israel here, they mean the ancient biblical Israelites, right? Therefore, it is useless to try to understand what followed the futile attempts of Moses to overthrow the golden calf of Israel by looking to the Old Testament alone. All right, so remember, this author has a whole view of the Bible, right? He says it's all symbolic, right? No real history, right? But then he points it out as real history, so he kind of contradicts himself a little. But to be sure, the people of the sea had reduced the pharaoh to a mere ghost of the world emperor Sesostris. So when ancient Egypt, they wrote about in their books that they got invaded by a sea people. And in my Danite videos, we made a very big correlation to those possibly being the Danites, so-called sea Phoenicians, so-called people. They had feather crowns. They're described as having feather crowns in the Egyptian annals. You guys remember that? In my Danite videos, I got 3 different Danite videos. Yeah, so these people reduced the pharaoh, right, to mere ghosts of the world emperor Sesostris. But soon even Judah, the scepter tribe of Israel, the scepter tribe, remember, the scepter will always be with Judah. Do you guys understand that? Anybody that has royalty or the king or queen or title like that they might most likely be line of Judah, even if you think they're hijacked today, even if they're bastard kids, even if they took over and they're bastard kids, they can't rule without having Judah blood. I don't know if you guys knew that. Because the scepter will always remain with Judah. The scepter tribe of Israel and the Levites, to whom the philosophic ark of Mosaic was entrusted, had fallen victim to the golden calf, against which the Hebraic prophets were to rail in vain from the time of Elijah and Elijah, to the appearance of John the Precursor. John who? All I know is Prester John. Who was Prester John? Consequently, we must look elsewhere than to the Pentateuch, the Septuagint, and Vulgate, and the Bible of James I, for the history of what followed the death of Mosaism on the symbolic Mount Pisgah. Huh, which one? The real one in Utah? Or you talking about a fake one? I know a Mount Pisgah where Moses traveled to, right? He went to Mount Nebo, then he went to Mount Pisgah. He saw the whole the whole land of Judah. We showed the places, right? We showed, we got the video. The gradual overthrow of Sesostris by the pirates, Phoenician, so-called sea peoples, inevitably had compelled the Egyptians to abandon their attempts to conquer the Celestial Empire. This had enabled the Chinese to found the Zhou dynasty in 1115 BC, just before the passing of the last Ramesside. Now candidates for public office were examined for their requisite proficiency in archery, horsemanship, writing, reckoning, music, and the ceremonial of personal deportment. I want to go back to something since we're mentioning Sesostris and Ramesses and this dynasty, right? Who is being overthrown. Who are they? We call them so-called Egyptians, right? Let me see if I can. All right. Easy way to find this video, if you go to my genealogical stories playlist. These are all my playlists right here, by the way. So is it this one? Let me see. Scotia. I think it's this one. I think it's this one, episode 8, where you can see the genealogical stories of Scotia, right? Let me see if there's anyone. Yeah, I think it's that one. So real quick, I just want to show you guys, right? And this is from the annals, ancient annals of Ireland and Scotland, right? And again, today, some
Si quieres crear una
historians might try to call it myth, you know, or, you know, whatever. But it's part of their history, their ancient history. They didn't see it as myth. All right, so here we go. Let me see. Isau, okay. Look how we open it right to the page. All right. So if you look at the all the way to the right, you guys see it says Isau. Then you got Eliphaz, Amalek, Tardum, Walid, right? So Walid is and all these are different names. Hold on, I'm gonna show you. Got another table here. This is a pretty good little video to understand that. This Walid and Riyim are Egyptian names in Egypt. And in the Quran or in the Muslim world, they had different names. Okay, so check it out. Or Setai the first, or Ramses the first. See, the Walid and Rayim is Ramses the first, Menepal. So Setis, Sesostris, they come from Isau, guys. They come from Isau. That's what the Egyptian side of Princess Kosha, the Egyptian side, so-called Egyptian, that's her line right there, right? And she hooked up with the line of Judah, right? She hooked up with the line of Judah in Ireland or Scotland, right? Scotia, yeah, Scotland, Caledonia, ancient Caledonia. So that's pretty interesting that this chapter is kind of mentioning these things, right? Just so you have reference of what we've gone over before. And go back. So all, even after the passing of the last Ramesside or Ramses line, okay. So it says here, Now candidates for public office were examined for the requisite proficiency in archery, horsemanship, writing, reckoning, music, and the ceremonial of personal deportment. At this time, the Chinese view was that the emperor should also be example to his people, and that he should be held responsible for their welfare. Consequently, even the emperor was subject to a reprimand by the duly constituted public demonstrator called Tian, who mingled with the people to correct their faults, while Mandarin saw to it that no man remained unmarried after the age of 30. There were departments of government ruled over by mandarins of heaven and also of earth, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, with provisions for land taxes mapping the 9 districts of the empire. And there were maps showing the sacred mountain in each district, its rivers, lakes, and products. With provisions for triennial census, the common people were divided into 9 vocational groups, and slavery did not exist. Notwithstanding these and other things disclosed by the Book of Rights, Western historians would have us believe no knowledge was possessed of Alaska by those who administered this high civilization in China, that mariners who had possessed a magnetic compass for 1500 years had not followed the stepping stones from China to the Golden Gate of Queen Khalifa. All right, guys, look at that. In whose realm appear countless place names similar to those in China. Uh-oh, they just snitched right there. I told you, where's the real ancient Sinai? Sana. Where's Asia Major, guys? Where's the real Kate Kibara? The Straits of Anion. Shout out to Drop. Get the Prester John Drop. They're literally telling you, how could ancient so-called Chinese people not know of Alaska? They want us to believe that, right? Of course, people were coming from that side. You know, of course, people were coming from that side. And ships, not just walking through the Bering Strait like that, the whole Clovis thing. That's it. See, there's a real history, and then there's a history they want you to believe, and then they want you to they want to brainwash you, you know. But these people, he's saying they were coming to do business and meet Queen Khalifa all the time. Who was she writing about? Remember this. See, we think China, ancient China, we think in modern day Chinese folks, right? What you picture, right? You know, like, what's the dude's the navigator, right? The San Sao, I forget his name. Sao. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? The famous Chinese, so-called Chinese navigator. He turned out to be Muslim. His people are Muslims. They're Arabs, so-called Moors. So, remember Queen Khalifa, we read in her story, she was approached by the Muslim world to go fight the so-called Nestorian Christians. She fell in love with one of their, right, the prince, right? Sounds very much like Solomon and Queen Sheba. You guys understand how we put all the information together, right? So, they're letting you know, hey, these so-called Chinese coming to meet with Queen Khalifa, right? Caliph. But with the Turks or Muslims against the so-called Christians, they were actually the Hebrews. Prester John and his son. Yeah. It's deeper. So, let's continue. I just thought that was interesting. Concurrently, at the other side of the world, important events also took place in the Mosaic Age. Israel of the Isles, listen, remember, that's why I'm saying, look at all this drop. This is book 1940s, I think, right? Yeah. We did the series on, you know, the nations of Israel and Europe, and how we linked up the line of Sarah and all this other stuff, and Queen Koshan, Queen Tefi, and the Tuatet, the Danan, the Danite videos, and everything else, right? We've done. And look how somebody was actually talking about this, mixing it with so much other things that link America to being part of the old world, if not the actual true old world. We already know that, but at least the person is linking it up with the old world, right? But he's saying the Israel of the Isles, remember the Isles of the West and all that, that was the British Isles and the Americas, all these Isles in the Atlantic, included the descendants of the eponymous Sarah. So these Isles, the British Isles, included what? The descendants of Sarah. Who's Sarah again, guys? The son of Judah. the brother of Pharez, the twin, right? According to biblical genealogy. And there are many ancient annals, not just in the Bible. For example, in Ireland, Scotland, right? That's what we're reading. I'm not pulling this stuff out of the Bible. We're reading ancient annals and stuff describing their history, their legends. Olam Folum, right? We're gonna mention, I bet you, Olam Folum today. Jeremiah. So the line of Sarah, that's the line of Judah, right? Remember, with Judah, the scepter will always be with Judah, right? So this line is entitled to that as well. This is a male line of Judah, right? Pharez is his twin brother. Pharez is where David comes from, and Zedekiah. And what happened to him and his line, and the women surviving and going to Ireland and hooking up with this line, the line of Sarah, the male Judas that was still alive, among whom were the Gadhelics of Ireland. So he's saying the descendants of this line of Judah, of Sarah, among whom were the Gadhelics of Ireland, represented in the genealogical tree of Israel by Gadhol. So that's cool because look, I'm trying to tell you guys. That video I was just showing you, right? Gadhol, right? You guys see right here in the middle? Gadhol, Sarah. Look at this. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. We got the drop. All right, hold on. Let me hold on. Like when I'm reading this stuff, I'm picturing this because I know we've gone over. Oh, come on. They hating. 10:33. Hold on. That's why they wanted to add their ad. That's why they wanted to add their ad, man. I spy. Oh, they spying. Look at that. Subliminal. I spy. Oh, hell no. What? Yeah. All right. So you see, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah. He had two sons, Pharez and Sarah, twin brothers. The line went to Pharez because he breached. He came out first. But Sarah already has stuck it out his hand. Remember? The red hand of Sarah, the red hand that we find even in the Maya temples. So you see through him, hold on, let's keep going down. Okay, so through Sarah, you got Eten Mahol Kaiko, which is Cyrus or Cyprus, or I forget in Greek. I forget who it was in Greek deities. And you got Darda too. Look, who is the founder of Troy, ancestor of Aeneas. You see that? And see how it comes back into somewhere in the line, back to Scotia and Heber. And this is, guys, I'm reading Our Race, Its Origin and Destiny. This is from annals of Ireland and Scotland, like ancient. So Gadhol, right? We just mentioned Gadhol, number 6 over here. Okay, so we go back to the book. You see, is the line of Sarah, where he was just saying. So the Gadhelics, that's what Gadhelics means, the descendants of Gadhol. Okay, guys? See, that even I didn't know what they meant by Gadhelics when I saw the title. I hadn't read this yet. I'm learning it with you right now in real time. We're learning together. So Gadhelics, he means those descended from Gadhol. All right, you see who Gadhol is, from a line of Sarah. These people already in Ireland, in ancient Ireland, the oldest petroglyphs in Northern Europe, still to be seen at the ancient shrine of Clonfinloch in County Islay, Isis the son. Islay, Isis the son and father. Shows that migrants arrived there from across the Bay of Biscay, referring to these Mediterraneans who now mingled their blood with the Tuahati de Danann. With the what? With the tribe of Dan. These ain't mythical people. These ain't mythical creatures. These were real people. They become myth in Ireland and mainstream. But to many, they know there's not a myth. A lot of Irish know this, right? Oh, we're getting some drop here today in this book, man. All right, let's go. It's a good review of stuff we already kind of gone over. A great English scholar wrote, after the old way of inventing persons to explain the names of tribes, the name Gadhal was derived by the ancient Irish clergy from a Gadhal or Gadhelas who lived in the time of Moses. His father Niul had married a daughter of that pharaoh. Okay, listen, who in pursuit of the Israelites was drowned in the Red Sea. Ha! Huh. Wow, her dad was one of the people who were chasing the Israelites and drowned in the real Red Sea. In the real Red Sea. Where's the real Red Sea? All my true followers. Where is the real Red Sea? Where are they talking about? If they talking about in ancient times, where is the real Red Sea? Come on now. Let people know. And called her Scotia because he was himself a Scythian. Oh, so this so-called Pharaoh whose daughter married Moses. Listen. Wow. Wow. Scythian, huh? What do we learn about the Scythians, the Sakai, so-called Saxon sons of Isaac? Same people. We're talking about all the same people, right? Scythians had mounds. Scythians had scalped their enemies like Indians. They had mounds. They buried their people in mounds. They had like giant bones as well, 7-footers, 8-footers, just like in the Americas. Who's the so-called Scythian? We ain't a movie. That's what I'm talking about. We ain't no movies. We live today. The blood continued in many ways, many looks, scattered, but the real recognized real. Their son was said to have been called Gadhal. So somebody said California, yeah, but let's get specific. The Gulf of California, which used to extend all the way up, making California an island, the island of Queen Khalifa, right? That was the Red Sea, the original Red Sea, very close to Utah, right? Or Judah. Very close to real ancient Egypt, right? So I gotta have real perspective. Their son was said to have been called Gadhal, as a lover of learning from Gaorth, which is an Irish learning, and Dil, which is an Irish love. So-called Irish. What are these ancient Irish speaking though? What is it that they're speaking, and is that a form of a dialect of Hebrew? We've broken this down. We read their books, talking about historians and anthropologists and all these people. We read their books. I got a whole video on that. What is Gaelic? Ancient Gaelic coming from Hebrew, so-called Hebrew, or the mother tongue. Here is a perfect illustration of how little Elizabethan Pharaoh lost his life pursuing the Israelites, to except in the sense that the power of Sesostris ultimately was broken by the enemies of Egypt. In the second place, the Gaelic Niul, corresponding to the Latin Nilu, implies dark. Implies dark. I ain't blackwashing. That's what it says there. Implies dark. He's saying number 3. So we find the Shat El Nil in Asia Minor, which means dark, huh? Nilu. Because these migrants came from Egypt, where in fact the Scythians had long been intermarrying with Egyptians. The Israelitic Gadhils were a relatively small, listen guys, come on man, this is dark people. Come on, listen. Man, we can't make this up, man. They said we blackwashing. They said we blackwashing. Who's here? We got 98 people. Are y'all getting the drop or what? Like, come on now, like, we got so many different things we've researched and put together and proven, and then you find a book all of a sudden. That's how wow right there, you find a book all of a sudden, it got just talking about everything we already broke down with a little bit more context with it, right? Anyways, so these Gadhils, right, from the line of Sarah, remember, don't get lost. He's letting you know these so-called Scythians had long been intermarrying with Egyptians. What Egyptians? Ancient Americans, right? Scythians and ancient Americans Scythians, sons of Isaac, Sakai, Saxon. You see the connection, why they have mounds, why they scalp too. Why does everything they do a lot like Indians, the so-called Scythians, the Sakai. Remember, Buddha was a Sakai from the Sakai people, sons of Isaac. Had long been intermarrying with so-called Egyptians. The Israelitic Gadhelics were relatively small, dark people upon whom the larger red-haired Tuati de Danann looked as inferior. So red hair don't mean anything with Tribadayan. Tribadayan. Danites, yeah, they were kind of going everywhere. Did they look different? Maybe. Red hair don't mean pale skin though, always. The time when these Israel, and also, okay, let's see the footnote 4. So it says origin of the Aryan tailor. So 1890s. It says the proof of where they came from will be found in the following. The Annals of Locke C. Hennessy, 1871. Look what it says, Chaldea, Egypt. Chaldea, ancient Ireland, right? We got the drop, Egypt, the connection with it. Egypt was an empire, not one place. You understand? Annals of the Kings of Ireland by the Four Masters, which we've read. O'Donovan, 1851. Annals of Hibernia. These are books we've read, guys. The Goidels of their predecessors, O'Reilly. Ireland in pre-Celtic times, McAllister. Ogham inscriptions of the Godhead, Dark people, right? He just said these are dark people. Brash. History of Phoenicia, Ridhusi. Atlantis and Andalusia. Wisha, yeah, that's a colony of Atlantis, yep. Historia de la creación del cielo y de la tierra, Ordóñez. All right, so this is what I was saying earlier. We're not just reading the Bible, like we're getting this from historic annals that are matching the Bible. A little bit, you know, because there's a lot of content missing. A lot of books been taken out of the Bible, like it's a lot of, like, you know, and then it's been turned into religion and, you know, anyways. That's what he's saying, but I don't know where it says in there anything about pale skin, right? I want anybody to go through this and tell me if any of those books say any of them being pale skin. All right. You know, and if they do, that would be interesting to see. Okay. The time when these Israelitic ancestors, listen, Israelitic ancestors of the Giles arrived in Ireland. So the Gauls come from, see? But you saw the whole breakdown in previous videos, right? How we breaking down the whole genealogy. The time when these Israelitic ancestors of the Gauls arrived in Ireland is indicated by the history of Cadiz, the Serpent Ford, in the ancient Atlantean realm of Gadhelics, marking the exact latitude of Utica, Sicily, the Peloponnesus of Greece, Rhodes, Antioch, Nineveh, and the Trinity of Karakorum. Karakorum, Cadiz, huh? Trinity of Kara, Black Korum. Cadiz also marks the meridian of Seville. The Scilly Islands, the P run round on Land's End in ancient Cornwall, Belfast, the island of Skye and the Faroes Island, and was occupied by the Phoenicians in 1100 BC. Since geology shows the two small islands shutting in the ancient Atlantean port of Cadiz were parts of Atlantis, it is useless to imagine the Phoenician descendants of the Pelasgi. So he broke that down in previous chapter, who they were, and you know, we have two in other books and other researches, who, as shown by the Odyssey, had visited Calypso. We're not familiar with the history of the past and the sea route to America from Portugalia, sea route to America, or as they always seeing it in reverse, right? In reverse. About the time the Phoenicians, so-called Phoenicians, occupied Cadiz, the eponymous Brutus, the descendant of the biblical Darda. Okay, we got a whole video on Brutus. We've shown that whole genealogy. He is a descendant of Darda, right? Through Aenis. Darda's a descendant of Sarah, right? And Sarah, a son of Judah. The founders of Troy, mythical, supposed mythical, Troy, right? Is Judah. The scepter will always be with Judah. Even if it becomes hijacked, even if they lose their ways. Just like Judah, just like Solomon, just like David. And the most, eventually they come back to the Most High. The mythical Hector of Troy established himself as king of the British Cymrics of London, where the mythical King Lud had built his fort. The mythical. You guys know who Lud is? Lud is a son of Shem, right? Remember that? You guys remember that? I know you remember that, right? Check this out. I think we got a whole episode on that too. Episode 11, genealogical stories, right? Make sure you get the drop if you haven't seen it. See how it all connects. This is what I'm saying. Like, it's hard to try to remember all this, by detail, but there's ways, there's ways. Let's see. Arphaxadites, the Chaldeans, Shem, Chaldeans, Arphaxadites. Who's the Chaldeans? The Arphaxadites, a son of Shem, Arphaxad. That's your so-called Chaldeans, right? So then we got a biblical. I'm showing even the, right? So we got Lud. You guys see? Son of Shem, Lud. Arphaxad, right? You got Ashur, where you get the Assyrians, right? Aramites, where you get Aramaic, Aramite, Aramaic is still speaking the mother tongue. That's why Aramaic and Hebrew are very similar. So Shem is the son of Luke. Well, I remember a lot because it's a lot of years of studying and just going over the same info over and over and over. Like literally this book is helping me because it goes over the same stuff we studied, Let me see if I talk about Lud here. I think I do. In one of the videos, we do talk about Lud and how he's the founder of London. So London is from Lud, the son of Shem. That's where you get London from, right? See how they don't gotta, and this is in the King James 1611 Bible, they don't have his descendancy. They don't want you to know all this stuff. This is what I'm saying. Many of the Semitic people, right? Sons of Shem are Semitic. That's where Semitic comes from. Shemitic, right? Are in Europe. So, where were we? So we got about the time, again, I'm going to read this paragraph. About the time the Phoenicians occupied Cadiz, the eponymous Brutus, the descendant of biblical Darda and of the mythical Hector of Troy, established himself as king of the British Cymrics at London, where the mythical King Lud had built his fort. He's not a myth. This is what I'm trying to tell you. They're turning all these people into a myth. Inasmuch as the founders of Israel had conceived a worldwide spiritual empire, the concurrent appearance of the Gadhelics in the strategic position of Ireland, of Brutus in England, the Phoenicians at Cadiz, whence they commanded the sea routes from the Mediterranean to the Gold Coast of Guinea, and to the Azores, or the Gold Coast of Guyana, Guinea. Literally, another way of spelling Guyana was with a G-U-I-N. Like the same way almost, where the real Gold Coast is. The usurpation of the throne of Egypt by a Libyan speaks for itself. Already we have seen that Israel traced back to what's that say? The inferior, is that something erased there? The inference is compelled, therefore, that the hierarchy of Israel meant to repossess themselves of the islands that would give them control of the Icelandic route, while the Israelitic Phoenicians at Cadiz guarded the Pillars of Hercules against a resurgence of Sesostris. Wow. I'm just picturing my own thing when I'm reading this, right? Like when I'm trying to read between the lines, right? Knowing what they're trying to these are tags: Israel, Phoenicians. Like, picture the real people. What he's talking about. It is not to be imagined, however. So it first Icelandic, right? All that northern, Scandinavian places, and you know the Arctic Circle, and then all the way to Iceland itself, literally right next to Americas, right? Greenland. So that route, you mean? Yeah, that Icelandic route that includes North America. It is not to be imagined, however, that the priesthood could extirpate the materialism of the golden calf. Despite the overthrow of Sesostris, the Assyrians were enjoying a far-flung trade when 1033 BC, David succeeded Saul. All right, Prester John. They push them way back in timelines, phantoms and duplicates. They create these fake timelines, push back the press to 3,000 years, huh? Look at it right there, exactly how they said, 3,000 years. 1000 BC is like 3,000 years. Yeah, they push them back. They make you think he's ancient. David succeeded Saul as king of Israel and proceeded to capture Jerusalem. He got it back from the hijacks. Thereupon the mysteries of the Kabila, of which Melchizedek, the king of Salem, had been hierarch in the age of Abraham, were inherited by the new Israel. Who is Melchizedek? That's a title, guys. I know a lot of you got into biblical history and you got a lot of opinions about it and know much about it. In my research, I've seen it a lot, and it does makes a lot of sense. Melchizedek is Shem, like literally. And Shem was still alive when he handed over the priesthood to Abraham. Because they say Melchizedek handed the priesthood. Yeah, I saw in the Bible, it told me how long Shem lived, and it even says that he was still around. Like it tells you he was still alive. These people live longer, right? These antediluvian descendants. Go check it out in the Bible. You see Shem was still alive. Google it right now. Shem was still alive when Abraham was living. Google it right now. So Shem, the king of Salem, Shem, the first priest after the flood, after the world was destroyed. So that's why he became the first priesthood. He is Melchizedek, Shem. It had been hierarch in the age of Abraham. Listen, it just literally said that, right? So he was still in the age of Abraham, were inherited by the new Israel. The new Israel, right? He passed over the priesthood to Abraham. With the Gadhelics in pre-Celtic Ireland, we may safely assume the eremitic form of Irish monotheism, identical with that in Egypt and Chaldea, had already been established when in 993 BC, Solomon succeeded David on the throne of Jerusalem. Another prester, title, right? We have now arrived at the point where, along with the conflict between the spiritual factor of the true cross, the material factor of gold, a third factor must be considered. When Solomon ascended the throne, there were numerous conflicting religions in his kingdom. Thus, there was Ishtar of the Chaldeans. They had fallen off, man. These Chaldeans, man, descendants of Arphaxad. Arphaxad dies in Kesed, his descendant Kesed. You get the Chaldeans. Ashtore of the Assyrians. Remember, the Assyrians come from Ashur as well. They had fallen off Semitic people. Ashur was a son of Shem. That's where the Assyrians come from. They were all these people Semitic, right? Ashtoreth of the Assyrians. Astarte of the Syrians. Serapis, Serapis. Thoth, man of the Egyptians, so-called Egyptians. Esau, huh? Esau's line over there. Serapis, huh? Baal of the Canaanites and Arabians. The pure Arabs, the Geminites, and the old Hebraic Javeh, the Kabbalists, right? Each represented devotees hostile to the others and all determined to prevail, notwithstanding Jehovah, or they're saying Hawa, and his Levites. What was a wise ruler to do in such a case? Was he to try, with the aid of one group, to crush the other? Or was he to let them all build their philosophic temples under the protection of Israel so long as they abjured idolatry? That's a good question. What do you do? The answer is found in the archaeology of Jerusalem, where During the reign of Solomon, the temples of Astarte and Ashtaroth both appeared, while the great temple of Helios was completed at Baalbek, marking the meridian of Antioch, where the idolatrous Canaanites had converted Baal into Baal. Today, no scholar doubts whence came the wisdom ascribed to Solomon, the origin of the political religious policy permitting freedom of worship in his realm. The proof is overwhelming that the temple erected by him was in fact the philosophic structure of the Freemasonry inherited by the Israelites from the eponymous Zoroaster representing the Magi of Persia, to whom the cult of Mithras also has been traced, because in fact the Masons, sons of the Magi, believed in religious freedom, assuring the right to every individual to worship God according to his conscience. Their cult was called Freemasonry. The cult, all right. So there's a lot of things to pull out here and a lot of hijacks to dodge. Okay. So when talking about Magi and Zoroaster, that comes from Hermetics, guys. That literally comes from the same thing: Serapists, Hermetics, so-called Egyptian mystery schools, which was the Thoth stuff, right? We went over the other day, Hermetics, Hermes, right? So yeah, a lot of these, remember that became part of Greek culture or Hellenized culture, right? Hellenism. So anything that is Hellenized included Hermetics. So yeah, a lot of Israelites became Hellenites, guys. Yes. Even Solomon got in trouble with the Most High for, going with his wife's religion, because he had many wives, right? You guys got to remember, listen. It says in the Bible, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, all right? So where's all the people that follow me that are scriptural? Like, you guys know I ain't making this up, right? Right, so he got in trouble. You know what I'm talking about when I say he got in trouble? Then he had to kind of like, come back to the Most High, and, Most High forgave him and all that. Like, he did build a temple, I think, for one of the hijacked gods for his wives. So I think David did the same. So one of them, I might be confusing one of each, but you guys let me know. Either way, so picture that, right? And the whole thing about Freemasonry, he's saying, calling it a code. Like, I can see how Hermetics, like, remember, when it comes to the whole idolization, iconography, symbolism, all these Hermetic symbols, that did become part of Freemasonry. But Freemasonry was about sacred geometry. Being a Mason is somebody who works with rock. When we talk about to the foundation of it, right? The knowledge, that's knowledge of being able to manipulate stone and all that and create your habitat or create a building or like architecture, right? That's sacred geometry. So, just what I'm saying. We pull out the babies, we dodge the hijack, we try to overstand. So naturally, therefore, the Freemasons from the first elicited the hostility of the various priesthoods to such an extent the utmost secrecy concerning their operations was necessary. That the religious freedom has been achieved throughout the world, Freemasonry, once deemed so hateful and even atheistical by those whose sway was challenged by, it seems an innocuous thing. Furthermore, since a complete reorganization in 1708, Freemasonry has officially inhibited political activities by its lodges as such. Yet in the past, at all times, it was a highly organized and tremendous force which operated underground in the same way as the cult of Mithras. Underground, huh? Knights Templars, all these things. What was it? There's a lot of Islamic stuff involved with it too. That's why a lot of time was underground, because it was against the Catholics. In fact, the Freemasons were merely those who undertook to quote the peoples who had adhered to the cult of the East and the cult of the West by uniting them upon the doctrine of the true cross. The true cross. Therefore, they were supposed to have reasshrined the ancient conception of the true cross in the philosophic temple of Solomon, working secretly down the ages and every clime to make the true cross constituting the Ark of Noah, the symbol not alone of spiritual salvation. The Freemasons from the time of Solomon were a power, although hidden, like the true cross and the Sphinx, the one in the footprint on Adam's Peak, the colossi of Bamian, the cube of Nippus. Therefore, they can no more be ignored by the historian than the priesthoods of the various religions and the temporal rulers who adopted in their regalia and banners the Masonic symbols and emblems. And remember where all that started. It is not attributed to ancient Egypt or blah, blah. Remember what it said, but to America. But to America. Remember, with the Israelites in possession of Iberia, right? Listen, Britain and Ireland, were the Freemasons merely to repeat the role of Sesostris in America? What? Sesostris in America? Okay. So let me just look. That was a cool, okay. I'm just looking at the. Or were they to interpret the true cross, marked out upon the surface of the earth in the manner of Solomon? Was it to be a living thing with force and virility? Or was it to be an ornament like the cross surmounting the mound and the regalia and banners of many kings today? However meaningless this symbol may have come to be to many in the present age, however much Freemasonry may have altered in character. Listen, this is deep right here because it's about to show you. Wow. That's deep. It says, however meaningless the symbol may have come to be, meaningless. It may have come to be to many in the present age, however much Freemasonry may have altered in character, the wisdom of Solomon, symbolized by his alleged seal. Alleged seal. Where is that? Is that really from Solomon, guys? So this is drop right here, expressed itself in a way that affords the key to American history from the age when Sesostris was humbled. All right, I'm gonna have to do it. So we're freestyling, we're surfing the wave, right? Hold on. Okay. The Star of Rephaim, I think. The Star of Rephaim. Okay. It says here the star. Well, the AI. Let's see what AI says. Nah, let's go to Wikipedia. Probably the same thing. See, they ain't gonna want to admit this. You know, the chasers ain't gonna want to admit this because that's their symbol, right? But this is where it really comes from. Rephaim. It says in the New Testament, Stephen condemns Jewish idolatry in the following verse: "You took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Rephaim, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon." In the Greek of the New Testament, it is mostly word-for-word quotation. Of the 3rd century BC Septuagint translation of Amos 5:26-27, "Ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and chewing your images, the star of your God, which ye made to yourselves." You guys made that. "Therefore will I cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, said the Lord, whose name is the God of hosts." Okay. The Star of Rephaim. That's what that is, guys. Trust me. Hold on. The Star of Rephaim. The Star of your God, Rephaim. The Star of your God, Rephaim. The black cube of Saturn. The cube, pentagonal. You see? Hold on, that one's crazy right here. Hold on. That's from the Hermetics book with the peacock on top. You see that with the high? We see Thoth on top right there. That's the falling angel right there. Remember, that's Malektus, the peacock angel. Look at the star. Like, this is deep. This is what I'm saying. This is Hermetics. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to say? And I think the author is pretty, like, he's literally the Star of David is not the Star reference. Yeah, that's them. That's their website. They don't want it. Yeah. You see? Overstand? Melech does not mean it means more of a messenger. The angels were Melech. So falling angels. One of them. The word became Moloch. But it means falling angel, one of the angels, Melech, messengers. Okay. Hey man, welcome back, man. Chungus Khan, man. You pop up only in, once in a while, man. I'm glad you're here, man. And yeah, and the Irish videos, I see you like those, man. Welcome back, man. All right. So the author, again, the alleged seal, right? He knows. The author knows it got altered. Much Freemasonry or much Hermetism. A lot of Hermeticists, a lot of these Hermeticists altered the character of the meaning of wisdom of Solomon, symbolized by the alleged seal, expressed itself in a way that affords the key to American history from the age when Sesostris was humbled. They literally keep telling you in this book that Sesostris was here, that Sesostris was here in the Americas. They keep the ancient Egypt, right? Pledged to the principle of human freedom in its political as well as in its philosophical aspect. The Freemasons demanded that the veil of Merope be drawn over the gilded man so that the relatively helpless red race might develop a core. Remember when he said red race, he meant red brown. We got a whole chapter he's talking breaking copper colored, huh? Might develop according to its own genius, free from the restraint of others so long as it moved along the upward path. Accordingly, Solomon entered in treaty with Balkis of Arabia. Solomon entered to a treaty with Balkis of Arabia, the Geminites, from Joktan, right? From Yoruba, pure Arab, Jarub, Jarub, Garub, Garub. The Queen of Sheba, because Sheba is one of the daughters of Saba, which is a son of Jarub, which is a grandson of Jakub, or Katan, a son of Eber. We went over that whole genealogy as well. We got a lot of drop here. We don't just stay focused on one little thing. We try to like go everywhere. Yeah, the Jotsis, that's what we showed in my Hermetics video, my thought videos. You know that, man. The angel Thoth, man. Like, yo, all right, man. All right, man. Thanks for coming once in a while, man. Thanks for coming every once in a while. Like, you're saying the same thing we're saying, man. We know deeper meanings to words too, man, more etymologically. Yeah, or the whole context, man. Okay. Express itself, so let's see. Queen Sheba from Saba. To be sure, it appears from the book of Kings that the subjects of Solomon visited the realms of Ophir and Havilah. So when we talk about Queen of Sheba, we talk about Queen Khalifa, right? I think eventually we're gonna figure that out. Remember, she fell in love with somebody, with one of the so-called Christian historians, just like they call Prester John an historian, and he's King David. Yeah, we go everywhere. We go everywhere. Some people get stuck in their region or with their own little things and not understanding the whole context of everything, man. Yeah, and if you just come around every once in a while, it's all good. Anyways, to be sure, it appears from the book of Kings that the subjects of Solomon. Oh, hold on. I didn't make sure I didn't skip anything. So it says Queen of Sheba, designed to cut the Egyptians off from the Indian Ocean. What India? To be sure, it appears from the book of Kings that the subjects of Solomon visited the realms of Ophir and Havilah. Of course, they came to the Americas. In the East, the real East, which had been colonized by Joktan. The Hebraic son of Eber. Yucatan, Katan, Katay. Yucatan, Jaktan, the Hebraic son of Eber, and eventually they are his son Jarub. Eventually is the progenitor of the pure Arabs. The Hebraic son of Eber. Here too they obtained vast quantities of the precious metals. Manifestly, therefore, they were familiar with the route to the mysterious realms of Punt, right? Punt, this is drop right here. I wonder if he's gonna mention it. I think he's gonna mention it. But Punt in the Americas, guys, we got so many Punt or Punta Arenas in Costa Rica, Punta Arenas, and the Punta, Punt, point. I know it's, but Hey, listen, there's a whole history behind it. Punt was in the Americas. You know, ancient Egypt was in the Americas, but Punt was in another part farther in the Americas still, but farther from where the center of so-called Egypt was, the empire, right? So let's just picture like them going from, North America to South America or to Central America, whatever, right? Punt in the Far East. So when you're in Asia and you keep going farther east, where do you end up eventually? In California, right? In Alaska and in the West Coast, right? In the Americas. You keep going east, eventually you're gonna hit the Americas. So the farthest east was always the Americas, guys, where Marco Polo went. So punt in the Far East, whither the subjects of Sesostris had been, won't go, won't want to go ostensibly in quest of spices. Oh, hey guys, this is one of the most resourceful places when it comes to plants and agriculture, right? But also we now know that during the centuries beginning with the reign of Solomon, a vast system of symbolic monuments called Marai spread over Polynesia, where older Atlantean works, including the Colossi of Easter Island and the labyrinths of Panape, had appeared. The reason why they were never mentioned by da Gama, Albuquerque, and Portuguese generally Magellan, Fernando, Villalboas, Francis Xavier, Drake, Cavendish, Lancaster, the Quiros, right? All these are Portuguese, right? Even though Francis and all these people come, like Drake, right? Like I told you, these are cryptos. Most of these are crypto Jews, crypto Muslims. Wallace and others who had visited the Pacific before the veil of Merope was torn away from the Pacific by Captain Cook is because the Marae were in fact the temples from which the Masons had undertaken to enlighten the surviving Melanites of Oceania. The Melanites, huh? These dark-skinned people of Oceania, the surviving from where? So-called Atlantis, huh? So originated the Polynesians with white as well as red, black, and yellow blood in their veins. Starts to hijack with the crayon color classification, modern view. Different shades, huh? Different looks, so are they all related? As we proceeded, we'll be seeing that the meridian 150 east, passing from the peak of Arman and the Marathi of Kamchatka through Panape, the Wisdom House, where today a Neolithic temple stands on the underlying labyrinth, marking the equator, and thence through the Solomon Islands, continuing the low archipelago, was in fact the dividing line established in the east between the old and new world. The true old world, the other side, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you mean in the Americas, yeah. And that was the line. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Concurrently, the meridian 150 west passing through McKinley in Alaska, the highest mountain in North America, and the realm of Otaheite was established as the dividing line between America and Polynesia. Wow. Wow. Consequently, a great mystery has ever surrounded the discovery of Tahiti. The question who discovered Tahiti is much like Delitzsch's query, Walag das Paradis. The sand language answers the one. The language of Lodi answers the other. When in 1768, Captain Cook, while in command of the British hydrographic expedition, engaged in surveying the Gulf of St. Lawrence, was suddenly ordered to Tahiti to observe the transit of Venus. The Englishman Wallace had already been there and well knew that ages before the Hebraic sons of Joktan and the subjects of Solomon had visited these parts. Prince Maya, we cannot make this shit up. I'm trying to tell you. The descendants of Joktan, right? Right? Yucatan, where are the Mayans coming from, right? Isn't like most of the Yucatan part of the Maya Empire? So we got Prince Maya, which we already got from, what's his name? Augustus Le Plongeon, right? The Queen Mu book and all that, like all the drop and other people too about Prince Maya and the Ramaya being literally stories of the ancient Americans who settled there and their land back in America, the mythical lands in the Ramaya, and about Prince Maya where he came. Literally, he's called Maya. He's literally called Maya, right? So again, before the Hebraic sons of Joktan and the subjects of Solomon had visited these parts, Prince Maya, the eponymous Enoch uh-oh. Tubal Cain and the Egyptian Tuamati had all visited the Garden of Loti. All these people had gone there. Tav had been there and stuff. Yeah, man. Prince Maya, all these people already have been there. Of course, we were doing that since from ancient America. Remember my navigational video and how we learned that, like in Costa Rica, Panama, the spear balls and all that, the navigation university was there. Like people used to go ahead and learn how to navigate there. And that was like a center. Like just it is today, there's still a canal there that combines the east and the west. So you don't have to go all around. Like that was always an ancient place. Some say there was a canal already between Costa Rica and Nicaragua, an ancient one, and it actually shows that in old maps. And that something happened, like the land changed, volcanic eruption, earthquake, whatever, and it kind of blocked the rest, one of the ways, which was through the Lake of Nicaragua. So, anyways, you see how, man, it's deep history that, you know, it's more than just biblical stories, it's more than just myth, is what we're trying to show you. And it always kind of relates to ancient America. The Gardens of Loti. Huh. Like Loki, right? But if the Asiatics and Egyptians had to be denied free access to Polynesia, the Europeans and peoples of Asia Minor and Africa had to be cut off from America. Hmm? Accordingly, the meridian 30 west passing through eastern Greenland, the Azores, and Cape Verde Islands was also a dividing line. That's what's up. See, as I said, Cape Verde is probably was more connected to Atlantis and the Americas too. These are like the mountaintops of this ancient part of the Americas and or the land continent that went down, you know. And I was still part of that, like with the British Isles and everything. Thus, the old world, in the Masonic sense, extended 180 degrees eastward from the Azores to the Solomon Islands. All right. Wow, that's so much drop right there. That is so much drop right there. So I finally picture what they're saying. So, like saying, like, I'm picturing it like this, right? I'm just to make it more clear to you. Two different lands, right? Even if those two lands were connected before, as Jagai said, Penji or whatever, but he's saying two different lands. And on one part, you got Africa, like he was saying, cut off, right? So you got Asia Minor and Africa cut off, and then from the Solomon Islands all the way to Cape Verde, that was one land. The British Isles connected, all that was one land. You guys understand? But it includes some parts of the Southeast Asia, the Solomon Islands. Oh man. And so extended all the way from the Azores to the Solomon Islands, that was your true Lemuria, Atlantis, you know, that's how big it was. Remember, this bigger than Libya and Asia put together. Remember, that's what Plato described, bigger than Libya and Asia and Europe put together. Libya was Africa, Asia is Asia, right? So that was one, and there's another side. So from the Solomon Island and from, sorry, hold on. The time of Solomon, it was taboo under the unwritten law of the various priesthoods in the old world to refer to what lay at the antipodes. So you couldn't talk about, hey, the farthest, you couldn't talk about the real original motherland, the antipodes, these mythical ancient lands. Let's go back to this. So he mentioned this earlier, the Colossi of Bamian. He's saying that was these same people, right? So Patala or Helulan became the Hebraic hell peopled by red devils. You see, just like when the Europeans came, they said they called them red devils. Now that's hell because that's where the sun sets. You gotta understand. The sun sets in the west. That's where, yeah. That is Amenti. For the Egyptians, a lot of times Amenti is a real place, not hell, but the Americas, guys. The red devils, huh? In Greece, Erebus originally merely implying the realm in the west, like I just said, where the sun. Oh my gosh, I swear I didn't know that he was about to repeat me and quote me. I swear I didn't know he was about to quote me. I haven't read this before. So Patata or Helluland became the Hebraic hell peopled by red devils. In Greece, Erebus originally merely implying the realm in the west, where the sun went to sleep, where the sun set. I told you, to which the name Europa traces, to which the name Europa traces, I think they get that name from, became confused with the nether realm of Hades, to which Hercules, the warrior of Zeus, had been sent. Hercules was here, right? Samson had been sent to recover three-headed dog Cerberus cast by Zeus into Hades. In the Greek myth, we find the evidence that it was from the vanished realm of East that the mysteries of the Kabiri or Caribi, the Carib Kabiri had been transmitted to the Ionians by their Sinitic forebears. Restrictions upon liberty to loot a helpless people were one thing, but human nature was another. Just as there were pirates, robbers of the sea, among the Norse pirati, the Danes, these black heathens, these black conquerors, Danites, literally described like that. Pirati, so there were among the Israelites. Just like there was pirates amongst the Norse, there was pirates and robbers of the sea amongst the Israelites. Why not? Therefore, the restrictions imposed by Solomon to protect his 10,000 wives 10,000 wives. I didn't know he had 10,000. You know, and the Bible says he had 700. No, what is it? Yeah, 700 wives and 300 concubines. I don't know about 10,000 wives, but damn, how is that even possible, man? You know, you can't, you know, there's a lot of them you didn't even meet. 10,000 wives representing the many peoples within the Masonic guardianship. Okay, that's what it means. Were not welcome to those over whom Judah, as the scepter tribe of Israel, had come to rule. They were not welcomed by then, huh? Accordingly, hardly had Solomon's cycle expired when the 10 tribes seceded from the kingdom of David and established the kingdom of Israel in Samaria, in Amaria. Add a C right there. Add a C at the end right there, before the A. Samariaka, Amarica, Samaria, under its own ruler. The descendants, so listen, Samaria, we got a drop in the Chaldean book. Most likely, Summer was the British Isles, you know, around there. And again, all that was connected to ancient America. You know, we see there was most likely a land bridge at that time, you know. The descendants of the Hittites who had united with the original Hebrews of Judah under Abraham did not mean to be ruled by the mixed Hebraic ancestors of the Jews who had alliance with the Arabians were dominating Jerusalem. Nevertheless, by 900 BC, Freemasonry had been extended to the Celtic Druids called Phoenicians. Who's the so-called Druids? Who's these so-called Phoenicians who now guarded the Pythian, Titanian mysteries at Olympus? Accordingly, at this time appeared along the upper Danube the so-called Hallstatt culture, owing its name to the Teutonies of Hell, all right, characterized by the peculiar leaf-shaped sword reflecting the influence of the Danite Danite, Danite. Yeah, that's Israelites doing this stuff. Yeah. Soon, however, despite the Celtic Freemasons, Celtic, what is the Celtic? Freemasons, huh? Is that what they called themselves back then? When they, the shrewd Ahab, king of Israel, in order to gain access for the Israelites of Samaria to the Mediterranean and Atlantic, married Jezebel, the daughter of the king of Tyre. And a lot of the Tyrians have Danite blood, guys. We've broken this down, man. Which since the destruction of Sidon and Troy had become the richest part of Asia Minor. And emulating its predecessors was now gleaming like burnished gold, despite the lashings of the prophets Elijah and Elisha from the holy cave temples of Mount Carmel. Already the Sumerians had adopted the idolatry of the degraded Phoenicians, who had been looting the Gold Coast of Guinea. When the progeny when the progeny of Jezebel united with their neighbors to found at the ancient site of Utica, the den of iniquity to which they gave the name Carthage. Thus it is evident they meant to dominate Messina in Sicily at the Tyrrhenian gateway and cut Cadiz off from Palestine so that they might levy a toll on the entire trade of the Mediterranean world. Soon they had, soon they had set up the barbaric god Baal in the form of brazen Moloch to terrify the Bashki of the Pyrenees. Remember when we were learning about Halloween and Samhain? That is part of what they're talking about. This worship became very popular amongst the so-called Druids, Celts, right? Or he's calling Freemason Celts, or Hellenized Hermetic Celts, or ancient Israelites that got Hellenized. Yeah, they fell off. Yeah, yeah. Soon they had set up, okay, I got that. So soon they had set up barbaric god Baal in the form of brazen Moloch to terrify the Basque of the Pyrenees, or the Basque. Who are the Basque? Coming from Atlantis too, they say. The Lusitani of Portugal. These are all your Lusitanians. A lot of so-called Sephardic Jews were actually Lusitanians and Basque. A lot of your so-called Spanish and Portuguese were actually very ancient people that descend from the ancient Basque and Lusitani of Portugal. The Galicians of Iberia, the Ligurian Gauls, including the Etruscan descendants of Lydians, the Italic Sabines, the Sicilians and the Berbers into submission. With their eyes on the Gaelic man, the welders of the house that soared like Elijah. And Elisha saw in the resurgence of Sesostris. The descendants of the Pelasgi had not only established the idolatry of the old Canaanite Baal, perverted religion to political ends, and resorted to the fiery furnace of Moloch to establish their sway, but had debased the Orphic rites into the degenerate female cult of Venus. Again, all this is Hermetics. Orphic rites or phallic and all that. Man, a lot of that comes from the Hermetics, guys. Like, we broke it down, like how ancient it is. Venus and her profane aspect are ever associated with the unholy grove of Ascalon, at the port of Jerusalem, as well as in Ionia, Greece, Sicily, and elsewhere. In short, religion had been phallicized, until even the symbols of the wisdom philosophy had been perverted. The symbols got perverted, it became Hermetics. Therefore, this new mission of the Celtic world was to drive the degenerate Mediterraneans out of Europe and figuratively stamp Carthage at the foot of the boot out of existence. Once this motive of Celtic politics is understood, all that followed the founding of Carthage becomes plain. Within 4 years after Moloch had been set up at the Tyrrhenian gateway, while Elijah and Elisha were branding the various moon goddesses along with gold as the Antichrist, Lycurgus appeared among the sturdy Dorians who, in pre-Homeric times, had invaded the Peloponnesus from the north. Found in Sparta, he gave to this patriarchal aristocracy the rugged moral and military institutions designed to bring into being the model of the state which alone could cleanse Greece of the degeneracy into which it had fallen. But who are the Spartans? This is also a line of Judah, guys. This in truth was the implication of Sparta, of which few modern writers have had the least conception. So Lacedaemon or Macedonians, right? Like I forget the progenitor that links to the Israelites. Thus they had judged the institutions of Sparta, which were admirably adapted to the situation existing at the time it was founded, in the light of modern standards. But although the Freemasons, represented by Lycurgus, had unsheathed the sword of Michael against the degraded Mediterranean allies of Sesostris who had set up Moloch to end religious liberty, more than the laws of Lycurgus and the founding of Sparta was necessary. The countless groups in Greece, including those of Argos, Achaeans, all right, a lot of these Israelite, Hebraic, Semitic people, Corians, Thebes, and Euboea, all jealous of each other, must be given a unifying philosophy designed not only to uplift them morally, but to nationalize them. Accordingly, the eponymous Hesiod, representing the adepts of the Cabiri, enshrined at the Euboean Olympus, remodeled the old Atlantean myths, where's Atlantis, embodied in the Homeric poems, wherein Atlas had played so large a role and gave to the Greeks a whole the historical compromise with the Celtic Olympus, 40 degrees north in Moesia, that is embodied in the theogony wherein Hercules was made the national hero. This having been done, the eclipse of 776 BC observed by the Chinese at Peking, God's house, was taken as the initial date for the calendar of the New Greece. And this same year, thanks to Sparta, the first Olympiad designed to encourage the emulation of the physical progress ascribed to Hercules, the warrior of Zeus, was instituted. The vital pertinence of all this to the history of America is plain. With its large pre-Celtic Mediterranean population, Greece was too much under the Asiatic influence of Ionia, Syria, Egypt, and the old Trojan traditions of the Moesian Olympus to constitute the spiritual capital of the Celtic world. Besides, political considerations involved in the projected struggle with Carthage demanded that a new capital be established beyond the Tyrrhenian gateway. Accordingly, logic played the same part in the founding of the Italic Rome it plays in the founding of Etruria. Countless Greeks had occupied the Adriatic coast of Italy, Apulia, and Calabria, constituting Graeca Minoris, or Greece, Asia. What is it, Greece? Minor Greece, or Greece Minor. Remember so-called Greeks, a lot of these so-called Greeks, we've broken it down, guys. Who was these so-called Greeks too? So these Greco-Minoris were at Ascalon. The same degenerate rites had been established in Sicily at the Syrian Ascalon. Here too the moon god had been rethroned at Mount Cassino and Messina, when at last in 753 BC the mythical twins Romulus and Remus, said to have been nurtured by a she-wolf, seized the 7 hills, right, of Latium. Romulus, wolf, that's a symbol of the tribe of Benjamin, right? There's a lot of relation with Benjamin and so-called Romans. Romulus and Remus, said to have been nurtured by a she-wolf, seized the 7 hills of Latium, where ages before Janus had been enshrined by the Lydian Etrusca upon the Janiculum. So came into being the holy city of Rome, where the new temple of Janus, constituting a 4-way arch as a symbol of the Celtic true cross, furnished the sacred seat of Pontifex Maximus. Upon this priestly arbiter was conferred the power to ensure religious liberty to all who kept peace, and to enforce peace upon all those who without just cause resorted to war in violation of the true cross. Consequently, when the gates of the Janiculum were closed, war was forbidden, under penalty of the lex, the Holy Cross, designed to ensure freedom of worship and to maintain the pax, Papa Cross of Rome. All right, so again, we pull out the babies, we dodge the hijacks. All right, this indeed is a very different picture from the found in current history, which leaves the origin of Greece and Rome entirely unexplained. That's so true. This is what I'm saying. What Greece, what Rome, so-called ancient, so-called Greek, so-called Romans. It's a group of a lot of people, they're grouping together, guys. I'm trying to tell you, it's an empires. Because as he tells us right here, in mainstream history, they don't know how Rome and Greece just came out of nowhere. It's mythology. Just like ancient Egypt, they don't know because they put it in the wrong places. They're changing timelines. They're adding phantoms and duplicates, right? And that's why it's unexplained. As it says here, it leaves the origin of Greece and Rome entirely unexplained. Who's the real Romans? Who's the so-called Greeks? Yet we may be sure that the Romans, who with their eyes upon the Gaelic man had entrusted the sword of Michael to Pontifex Maximus, were whispering Centerum senseo Carthaginem esse delendum, as they witnessed the great vessels of the Carthaginians and Phoenicians pass through the pillars of Hercules into the radiance of the western sun. Like literally telling you they're coming to the Americas. The pillars of Hercules, the Straits of Gibraltar, is where Spain and Morocco meet. Once you go west from there, you end up in the Americas, right? Once you follow the western sun, Both gold and silver were still pouring into Ireland. Where's it coming from? And Scandinavia, between whom the most intimate relations existed at this time, while a thriving trade between Pirati and Russia was in progress. Pirati Danes, huh? Dane, what? Who's these fee-faring people? So-called Russians? You mean Danny Danilovich and them? Peter the Great, you mean? Batukan? Phantoms and duplicates, false timelines, man. This, of course, was known to the Pythians, certainly those who had hurled the people of the sea against Sesostris and established Islanda, the Ultima Thule, as a dividing place. Iceland would have spared no effort to safeguard the red race against the Pirati, the red race, the copper-colored tribes. It would have been impossible to cut these people off from Labrador, right? Labrador, that's up there in North America, which included Greenland, to which they had free access by way of Spitzenbergen, as well as Iceland. Literally telling you these people are going back and forth way before Columbus, right? But they try to always say it in reverse, like they might not be anciently related to these people. That's why they were going back and forth, right? Where's the true old world? It would have been, okay, so I got that. Yet only a relatively few Algonquins or Algonquins had come to inhabit northern region of Canada. Therefore, by establishing a colony in the strategic position south of Lake Ontario between the Adirondacks and Niagara, which included the great salt beds in the region of the Genesee, it was entirely possible to safeguard the red race as a whole. What are you talking about? Saying people came and settled in these... In all probability, it was now that the two brothers, constituting the original Iroquois, moved up the St. Lawrence and possessed themselves of the indispensable salt beds around Syracuse, huh? So at the same time, you were just talking about Romans, right? Romans, huh? And with the Gaelic people, indigenous people. Now you're talking about Iroquois at the same time, these two brothers, right? He just said Romulus. Let's go back. Like, I can't make this up, guys. Like, I know a lot of you still don't doubt what I'm trying to say. So, in 1753, the mythical twins, Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, same story. There's a story about brothers. I know that story about brothers goes way back, but I'm just tell you, look, it was now that the two brothers constituting the original Iroquois moved up the St. Lawrence and possessed themselves of the indispensable salt beds around the Syracuse in the strategic position of northern New York. Huh, same time they were looking for the same thing too? Having occupied the region from Chateauneuf, Hudson, and the Adirondacks of Niagara, they appear to have been halted by the Algonquin Chippewa, the Potawatomi, the Erie, the Wea, the Miami, and other groups. The Chippewa called one group the Oneida and the other Onondaga, the first implying those who set up the stone, and the other the name bearers. The first name had reference to the great Sienite boulder at Oneida Castle in northern New York. The Romans of the West, that's right, Chai. Pay attention, huh? Yeah. So the first name had referred or reference to the great Sienite boulder at Oneida Castle, northern New York, near the headwaters of the Susquehanna. Did they recognize in the 12 lakes beginning with Onondaga and extending in the Genesee, of which the 5 larger ones resembled the fingers of a human hand, a natural symbol of the 12 gods of the Olympian pantheon? 12 gods, huh? Just like there's 12 patriarchs in Israel, right? Whatever the fact, the symbol of the Oneida was the 3, so that in the boulder is to be seen a pillar of the tree cult, extant among the Pythians, calling themselves Onwanon Sioni, we of the extended lodge, and given to the Shatamu, ghost of Mother Mu. Ha! Wow, the ghost of Mother Mu, Queen Mu, the ghost there. What does it mean? The descendants? Whoa. the name Taswacinta. They first extended their laws by adopting the alien dark Mohawks. The what? The what? Dark Mohawks. Dark Indians of this region, whose traditions indicate once they had occupied Montreal, listen, in Canada, dark complexion. Thereby they provided themselves with the sword of self-defense. So came into being the three brothers of whom the fierce Mohawks, notably darker and more savage than the Oneida and Onondaga than the Iroquois, were designated by the early French as inferiors because they were of pure native stock. That's it, because they were of pure native stock and they were darker, right? Doubtless akin to the Mohawks, so Mohawks of the Oregon, and the Siouan Manahawks of Virginia. Related, huh? How are they related to these two different? So they must be Siouan then. So these dark Mohawks relating to the Siouan Manahawks, huh? Eastern Siouan. So that's the same as you gotta be related to the Catawba, the Saponi, because these are Eastern Siouan too. So the Siouans came out of Ohio, so it's just near this area, closer, right? So you see, the Manahawks of Virginia related to the dark Mohawks, and the Mohawks of Oregon. So not the Mohawks of the East, but these are different Mohawks, so Mohawks of Oregon. So the Monarchs of Virginia, the Iroquois Sagamores, were never able to extirpate among them the practice of scalping common to the Mohawks, Siouans, and Muskogee, just like the Scythians, right? As in the case of the Siouans and Muskogee, the Iroquoian social system was based on clans with animistic zodiacal names corresponding to those of the Celtic groups, just like the Celtics, and the Egyptian gnomes. Thus, when the three brothers assembled in council, they seated themselves in a circle around a vestal fire, just as the case of the Druids, just like the Druids. Pay attention. Who's the Druids? Who's those ancient indigenous people of Europe? That's what I'm telling you. There's a strong connection here with ancient America. Very strong connection. Taking precedence in all things, the Oneida sat at the north, while the Onondaga sat at the south, and the Mohawks at the east. The Onondagas boosted 9 clans: the wolf, tortoise, bear, deer, eel, beaver, ball, snipe, and pigeon hawk. Of them, 3 had 3 chiefs, 5 2, and 1 a single chief in the federal council. The Oneidas and Mohawks, however, both had only 3 clans: the turtle, wolf, and bear, each with 3 chiefs. Thus the Oneidas had 17, while the Onondagas and Mohawks together had 18 representatives at the fire. Pura vida, pura vida. Such was the beginning of the Republican League to enforce peace, which eventually evolved into the 6 nations constituting the Haudenosaunee, to which the American Republic has been traced. All right, what are they talking about, guys? What do they mean, the American Republic? Because they try to tell us, oh, we copied like the Roman Magna Carta. No, man, you guys copied the original Magna Carta. Yeah, the real Magna Carta, the Great Peace Treaty, the Great Peace, that the Iroquois followed. That's where you get your democracy and your republics. The Constitution, the Constitution they copied from the Iroquois, guys. Just like the Magna Carta, right, of the Romans. Nor does the code of the Na'Bosnaha or Jamum, common to the Algonquins and Iroquoians, obviously a mixture of the Serpent Code, obviously, the Tree Code, and the primitive Christianity of the Norse Christians, fail to suggest the influence of the Itzais. Wow. So literally telling you, look, a lot of these practices, especially, look, amongst the Iroquois and Algonquins, they had it was like a pre-Christian thing, So where does that really come from? That's what I'm saying. Remember where thought is from? The influence of the Itzaes. While it is useless to dogmatize with respect to the exact time when the two brothers set up the pillar at Oneida Castle by 740 BC, the prophecies of Isaiah had begun. Well might the great teacher rant and rave. Already the barbarous Moloch, enshrined by the degraded Punics of Carthage, had appeared in Jerusalem, where during the next century children continued to be fed to the fiery maw of this idol. Now too the golden calf was much revered by the scepter tribe of Judah, and as by the other Israelites. They worship in the golden calf, guys. Remember what happened? The Most High was mad. The Most High was, we fell off. We didn't keep the code. We didn't keep the code. Within 4 years after the appearance of Isaiah, the Corinthians had founded Syracuse. Huh, Syracuse, huh? Which one? The fake one or real one? as, as a direct challenge to the iniquitous Carthage and Moloch. Nor it is to be imagined that God's house was to tolerate the increasing depravity of the Israelites. Long since Moses had foretold that judicial blindness would be inflicted upon them for their disobedience, right? Deuteronomy 28, right? To the commands of God. Deuteronomy 28, right? And 29. The agency through which this was accomplished was the great military state of Assyria through the descendants of Ashur, another son of Shem. Yeah, Assyria, right? Captivity. There's a lot of their connection with that whole Bering Strait crossing. Maybe we're not really paying attention to the real story of that. Who really crossing these? How does it relate to the Straits of Anion? How does it relate to Kivada, the seven cities of gold? Oh, like, it's deep, guys. Where is Assyria? Following the conquest of Tiglath-Pileser, his successor Shalmaneser began deporting the degenerate Sumerians, which of course had the effects of scattering others over the earth. Scattered who? Israelites, right? Over the earth, right? Hey guys, check this out. Do you guys remember Tartan, right? I just showed you the other day what Tartan meant. Who remembers? What is a Tartan? What is a Tartan when it comes to applied to a person? Do you guys remember the title? It's a title. Do you guys remember? All right, well, I'll just tell you. Tartan is a title for an Assyrian commander, army, military commander, an Assyrian specifically. And we literally read the other day that according to that in the Bible, these would be certain examples of a Tartan. Shalmaneser IV, Tiglath-Pileser, literally the same people that they're talking about here. Same people who put Israelites in captivity. Thus, your Tartans. Tartan. Tartan. Look it up. I'm not making this up. The sages of God house knew it. Sorry. So they got scattered. So these people are scattering everybody, right? The sages of God's house knew it useless to try to reform the Israelites in this way. Therefore, in 722 BC, the greatest Semite since Hammurabi, the greatest Semite, to whom code of law, that of Justinian traces, arrived at Akkad on the Euphrates in an ark, bearing the significant name Sargon II. Tartan at once overthrown Shalmaneser, while the latter was besieging Samaria. Within a year, Sargon II had reduced the Israelites to his sway, another Tartan. According to his own account, instead of massacring his captives, he deported 27,290, he's saying supposedly Israelites, right, to the isolated region southwest of the Caspian, where they were henceforth known as the people of Ghouta. Come on, man. And remember, this is also where you get your Scythians, and then you get these Sumerians being influenced, right? This is where you get your Khazars being influenced. They got Judaism around them, or Jews around, so-called Judah. Listen, this is why it's important to understand this. So there's no confusion, because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to these nations, or what we assume of them. Because the ancient name of Assyria was Gutium, people of Ghouta. Huh? Gutium, Guatemala. To replace the deported Israelites, large communities were transferred from Assyria, showing that Sargon was thriving not merely to destroy but to create, when an end was put by him to the kingdom of Israel. Recognizing the Aegean as the western limit of his empire, he returned to Assyria, where northeast of Nineveh, he erected the amazing symbolic imperial seat of Dur-Sharrukin, the modern Khorsabad, and by 1710 BC he had not only conquered Shemesh and Ashdod, but the whole of Babylonia. With the most advanced political concepts, he now divided the empire into separate states formed by the different peoples subjected by him, including some far east of the Tigris, placing over each of a military satrap who governed his province according to its local needs under excellent laws based on the Code of Hammurabi. The fact he not only fortified but glorified Babylon with the grandest architectural symbols it had yet known indicates quite clearly, Horton, right, that he deemed himself not a mere conqueror, but the executor of the ancient philosophic arc of God's house. Now, I just want to say something, guys. Even if he's the one saying, hey, let's build this, let's build that, he's using slave labor for that. The real architects, and a lot of the times, guys, were the Israelites, so-called Toltecs. They were the master builders. You know how they say Temple of Jerusalem, but Tyrians were a lot of those Danites, a lot of those Israelites. Remember, you got to understand their relationship to architecture, sacred geometry, so-called Freemasonry. So far-reaching was his influence that even the 7 kings of Cyprus, 7 kings, right? Or what about 6 kings? What about Vikings, right? VI kings. VI a Roman numeral. VI means 6 kings. VI kings, Vikings, so-called Vikings. And then you got 7 kings of Cyprus, eventually voluntarily accepted his sway and reared a statue of him on the shore of the Mediterranean to mark the western bounds of his empire. The most enlightened ruler who had appeared up until this time in Asia Minor. An analysis of his career shows that he was one of the few conquerors known to history who possessed the wisdom to recognize the practical limits of an empire. Also, he demonstrated his familiarity with the geodetic system by erecting at Babylon the ziggurat called El Sagilia, the house of the 7 spears of heaven and earth, with the fallen planet tower of Borsippa as his model. Hijack City. So again, the idea that the ancients who founded Rome believed the earth was flat is shown to have been based on propaganda. What propaganda? Human nature, whatever the color of man may be. Oh, now it don't matter the color. Or whatever the color may be, huh? Even if it's dark, mostly dark, is much the same. The spring and autumn annals ascribed to Confucius of a later age began with the very year Sargon's philosophic arc arrived at Akkad. In it, and in the commentary of one Tissot, is given a vivid picture of the Dwarfin effect exerted upon China by the feudal system during the past 3 centuries. There were trumpets, cymbals and drums, streaming banners, chariots, archers, swords, shields, and flags of truce, with minor tactics and strategy equal, if not superior, to those of medieval Europe, right? In marine warfare, bombs called stink pods, charged with a volatile gas, were dropped on hostile shipping after the latter had been grappled, while burning pitch was projected in containers against hostile vessels. The people lived in houses with walls of plaster and pressed earth, covered with well-thatched roofs. They had furniture, cooking utensils, and dishes. It's like here in America, they want to think people were just living in huts and stuff. Nah, they were living like this too, with utensils, everything, furniture. Clothing was of silk for the well-to-do who drank spirits and wine. That's how we chilled here in ancient America too. Private religion consisted solely of rites manifesting reverence for ancestors, for there were no gods. The emperors did all they could to encourage local popular institutions to offset the power of feudal lords, and interwoven with the social fabric were the extra-legal secret guilds designed to ensure collective rights. Through these societies, something of the ancient mysteries, all right, these ancient mysteries, that's hermetics, were handed down to the initiates of the lower degrees. Listen, man, just as in the case of the secret societies of the Egyptian nomes and the American tribes, the true old world and ancient Egypt was here, so it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Now, I'm gonna just go to that footnote. Let's see what he's saying. 50, Cambridge History of India. Wow. Periplus of the Erythea Sea. Oh, that's in there. Just like the American tribes, huh? True Old World, where's the origin? Such was the character of the country with which both India, what India, and Assyria, what Assyria, were in intimate intercourse when Sargon deported the Israelites to the Trans-Caucasus. Uh-oh. Thus it is seen materialism was rapidly supplanting the old spirituality of the Chinese Sinitics, when in 675 BC, Shantung became the leading port for the trade of China with Japan, Polynesia, India, and Assyria, Egypt, and Abyssinia. Within 15 years, there had occurred still another event of profound importance in the history of America. In 660 BC, Jimmu Tenno, the first Mikado of Japan, was crowned by the adepts of the Yamabushi and the knightly order of samurai, whose mysteries, of course, trace to Amara, whose mysteries, of course, trace to where? Amara, remember, sorry, in previous chapters, he broke down where the Amara was. That has to do with America. Whose mysteries, the samurai mysteries, trace back to Amara, Amaru, the immortals, to the immortals. And now new power rose in the Pacific. Following this, in China occurred the Great Economic Depression, attended by a marked falling in the supply of the precious metals. Inasmuch as the samurai were in fact the original Freemasons of Japan, we may assume that the guardianship of the dividing line had been entrusted to them. Wow. So, like, I'm trying to get what they're saying. Oh, hold on. We gotta fix this. Come on, man. Oh, it's hating. Hold on. During the tremendous struggle between the Assyrians, Medes, Chaldeans, and Israelites, which followed the death of Sargon and the breakup of his empire. Is that Genghis Khan? Sargon, huh? The Israelites, Danny Davilovich, deported by Sargon. So the Israelites deported by Sargon from Samaria escaped northward from the Trans-Caucasus through the Gate of Israel. While the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh settled in the region north of the Crimea. Here they were known to the Scythians as Gatae. So you see, this could all be true, guys. That's what I'm saying. And why what's his name? Anatoly Fomenko thinks that Jerusalem was there in Moscow. You got to understand, Jerusalem means haven. There was more than one Jerusalem, or where Israelites made havens, just like when the Sephardic Jews created their new Jerusalem in Amsterdam. So he's saying the Gatae are actually the Ephraim Manasseh. We're talking about ancient people here, right? Again, here they were known as the Scythians. Like I said, who's the Scythians? Man, sons of Isaac, right? Yep, Ephraim and Manasseh are sons of Isaac. That's their granddad, right? No, that's their great granddad. The granddad is Jacob. So here they were known to the Scythians as Gatae, of whom the larger group known as Masajate. And that's where you get a lot of drop with the Masajate and that connection. Like, we're gonna get into all this, guys. I know, like Drop and a lot of other people have gotten into it, right, in a deep level. So you remember when we're learning about this, how they relate to Ephraim and Manasseh. So the Masajeti moved into Kassiafa, east of the Caspian, mingling with the barbaric Scythians. Who are the Scythians, right? This family. They had fallen into utter depravity when in 624 BC, Draco, representing the Celtic Dracontia, gave to Athens the rigorous disciplinary laws designed to reform the degraded descendants of the once noble Hellenes, so-called ancient Greeks, Hellenized people. And 2 years later, the Hebrew reformer Jeremiah brought to light the book of the law, said to have been found in the Temple of Solomon. By this time, however, even the scepter tribe of Israel, Judah, right, was past redemption. They had fallen off too, man. When the Chaldeans, so-called Chaldeans, ancient Ireland, under Nebuchadnezzar conquered Assyria, Judah under Hezekiah entered into a new alliance with the Pharaoh Necho II of the 26th dynasty, who with his Punic allies proceeded to invade Samaria in order to assert the claim of Sesostris to Syria, only to be defeated by the Chaldeans in 604 BC at Carchemish. When this same year Hezekiah boosted the menace of Assyria was at an end already, Jeremiah was warning Judah of its impending fate. All right, you guys remember what happened to Hezekiah, the last king of Judah, of the line of Pharez, male king. People know male king. People still trying to debate me. This in the Bible. Only they slain Hezekiah and all his male heirs and all the heirs of Judah, and left the women of Judah alive. And Jeremiah, remember, was warning him, stop your evil ways. Most High is going to come for you. That's what it's saying right here. And Jeremiah eventually, with the survivors, the Judah, the daughters of Hezekiah, right? This is a famous thing, guys. Like, look it up. We got videos on this. The daughters of Hezekiah and Jeremiah eventually ended up in Ireland. And they hooked up with the lines of Scotia and the lines of Sarah, the male lines of Judah through that side, through that brother. That they already had been there. And many with the other, the tribes of Dan and all the other Israelites and Semitic people that were there. Jeremiah became Odlam Fotlam. So it says Sesostris, however, was not easy to down. Cut off from the Atlantic by the Greeks at Syracuse, the Egyptians and Phoenicians set out in 602 BC to dig the Suez Canal so that, again, to dig this, I told you, like this Nile from Egypt and this, look, the Suez Canal, they dug it up, guys. It's not natural. They even said they did that with the Nile, the fake Nile in Egypt. They dug it up. It's not a natural river like the Mississippi. So to dig the Suez Canal so that they might unite their fleets in the Indian Ocean. Inasmuch as the Greeks were now trading with the Chinese through the great caravan bases of the Black Sea, whence the Chaldeans, like the Assyrians, derived much of their wealth. It was not accident, of course, that concurrently with the appearance of the reformers Jimo Tenno, Jeremiah, and Lao Tse, the great Greek reformer Solon of Athens, a contemporary of Thales of Miletus, and also one of the 7 wise men, wow, of Greece, proceeded to Egypt. So all these people, famous historians at the same time, huh? Well, what if some of them are the same person and they're being duplicated in different times, right? It says undoubtedly he had visited Ionia and Persia, if not India, when in 602 BC he arrived at Sais, and here was told the history of the Atlantean kingdom of Sochis, right? They're saying, you know, the whole story of Solon, and he told Plato, right? He said he got it from the Greeks. You know, they're going over this again. So the Atlantean kingdom of Sochis, the high priest of Nave, the Egyptian Athene, what was later recorded by Plato. Looking at the history of the antediluvians, Hebrews, and various other peoples, including the Greeks, the visitor to Sais was told that in every case where human freedom had been yielded up in the pursuit of material benefits, the result had been the same. All right, this is deep right here, because if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it, and that's what we've been doing. Why did Atlantis fall? There's a moral story behind the whole Atlantis story as well, guys. There's a whole more material that you chase material, you bought that money may weather, you get what I'm saying? The results are always the same. What happens? And this society we live in, it's going down, guys, because it's always the same results. You can't live off of that stuff. That's not a real society. Plainly, the principle of the true cross must be enthroned by a nation if it were to survive. In this, Solon had agreed with the Egyptian hierophants when, even a wiser man, he returned to Athens. Thereupon, he set out to found a republic, for which the Atlantean kingdom founded by the mythical Poseidon, god of the ocean, all that relating to America, remember, and the brother of Zeus, known to the Egyptians and Romans as Neptune, and to the Hebrews as not to him, furnished the model. To save the Greeks from the evils of imperialism was not an easy task. By 600 BC, the Suez Canal was a reality. Thus, nearly 21 centuries before the Portuguese rounded the Cape of Good Hope, the seamen of Necho, including the Greek Exodus, Eudoxus, Eudoxus, had sailed around Africa to the Red Sea, to America, to over there, the Gulf of, okay. At this time, numerous naval expeditions also still were putting out from Egypt on long voyages with South Africa as their alleged destination. Alleged. The reports that they were visiting this region in quest of Kafir corn. Okay, now, see, this is what I'm saying, guys. I had a feeling they were talking about South America because they're saying they went around to get to the Red Sea, right? So if you go around South America, you end up in the Pacific, right? If you're in the Atlantic, right? And if you go up, you end up in the Gulf of Mexico, right? I mean, the Gulf of California or the true Red Sea. Now, look what it says here. We're looking for Kafir corn. They can't even hide the word. They should have said grain, right? Corn only grows and it's a native to the Americas, right? We already know. Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. I get what you're saying then. And spice, right? But the names applied to the gold, which now again began to appear in Egypt. That's the gold right there, the corn. But although it is obvious the Egyptians, Carthaginians, and Phoenicians had all located the gold fields of South Africa, it is equally what cornfields? Come on, man, gold fields. It is equally plain the Carthaginians were now visiting the Azores. Moreover, Necker Island in the Hawaiian archipelago does not fail to suggest that the seamen of Necker were going beyond the dividing line. In the East, when Lao Tse declared there would be fewer thieves were there less education, implying too many people had been initiated into the mysteries. This trite remark indicates that stealing in a big way similar to that of modern Napoleons of finance and industrial monopolists was in progress. While Lao Tse, Jeremiah, Solon, and Thales of Miletus, also one of the 7 wise men, credited with inventing the theodolite and calculating eclipses, were thriving to reform China, Judah, Greece, and Iona, respectively. Ezekiel, a master of Hermetic science, listen, hey man, maybe he was. Ezekiel, huh? Hermetic science, huh? Hermetics was railing at the Babylonian captives who had abandoned the faith of Israel. Meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar, as the patron of all the sciences, was bringing the child of Ea to the zenith of her glory, credited with building the hanging gardens of Babylon, a wondrous symbol of the Garden of Eden, and that is believed to be in the Americas, guys. I believe that was in the Americas. That's why they've never found it. They've never found these things, guys. We're talking about gardens, hanging gardens, Babylon. What is Babylon? In one book, they said Babylon was really the capital of Egypt, Memphis. That's where the center of Babylon was. So Babylon is just an empire, a time period, a ruling empire in a specific time period. Babylon, confusion. Don't get confused. A wondrous symbol of the Garden of Eden, located at the exact latitude of Lake Manosorawar. Also, he was restoring the fallen planet tower of Borsippa when the inevitable occurred. All right, again, we pull out the babies and we dodge the hijacks, right? All right, guys, we got a couple more pages, so thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys sticking around all the way to the end. All right, let's just continue. Hope you're enjoying the reading. It says, undoubtedly, the adepts of the Pythian mysteries knew exactly where the Egyptians and Carthaginians were going when in 600 BC, Solon and Thales dispatched the Phoenicians of Olympus to seize the Ligurian port of Massalensis on the meridian of Mont Blanc. a base from which to cut Sesostris off from Ligurian Gaul. So the first Freemasons entered France, right? That's where you get your Knights Templar from and all that. France was a very stronghold for a lot of these secret societies and dark arts, actually, guys. If you follow the French, wherever they went in the Americas, you're gonna find like voodoo and all that other stuff. It's not just an indigenous thing, but it was already altered by the time the Europeans brought their version of this, right? Literally goes back to Hermetics. So it says 4 years later, Nebuchadnezzar deported the ringleaders of the rebels under Hezekiah to Babylon. And within 2 years, more Solon proclaimed the constitution of the Greek Republic, 598 BC, wherein the four classes were given representation and a balance struck between the landowners and the demos. Nevertheless, still the demos, like the Hebrews, were far more interested in the golden calf than in government, which made it impossible for them to live at the expense of the propertied classes. Like many moderns, they wanted a Christmas tree, and not a tree of wisdom, and as a ruler with an Aladdin's lamp, like the Sesostris had been when at last in 586 BC, exasperated beyond endurance by the rebellious Hebrews, the seizure of Jerusalem, the deportation of the captives, and the leveling of its fortifications and temples was ordered by Nebuchadnezzar. Inevitably, of course, again, countless Hebrews escaped captivity by scattering to the four quarters. All right, you guys hear that? Just as in the case of the Israelites of Samaria. Many found their way to Syracuse, Rome, Marseilles, Carthage, and Cadiz, as well as to Arabia, Abyssinia, and Egypt. The fact Nebuchadnezzar was not a mere wanton destroyer, but like Sargon II was striking at an evil against which Jeremiah had struggled in vain, is abundantly clear, right? So he was working for the Most High, what they're trying to tell you, these people. Most High send these people, like, look, they know that they're punishing them too. Although an end was now put to the kingdom of Judah, he left the daughter of Zedekiah, okay? Listen, he left the daughters of Zedekiah. Oh, that's what, yeah. And Jeremiah and the scribe Baruch, remember Baruch? Baruch and Jeremiah ended up in Ireland under the governance of Gadhelics, free to welcome the return of worthy fugitives. Among those who soon reappeared were Johanan and Ishmael of the seed royal, who received full protection. But again, the evil influence of Sesostris appears. 7 months after the return of the treacherous Ishmael, he murdered Gedaliah, and his staff seized the princesses and Jeremiah. Wow. And took the captives' royal party to Egypt. From this, as well as the prophecies of Jeremiah, it is evident Judah as a whole did not relish the reformation which the prophets and Nebuchadnezzar both had urged. Now, you guys know Ishmael, right? Ishmaelites, you get a lot of Muslims from them, from Ishmael. Okay, you see what they did to Jeremiah and the daughters of Zedekiah, right? It seems equally plain that the early escape of Jeremiah and the heirs of David, right, which were these daughters, the women, not men, from Egypt, could not have occurred without the connivance and aid of the Hierophants. The truth is, the various peoples of the West, like those of India, had advanced to a point whence the masses, misguided by increasingly materialistic leaders, no longer welcome spiritual guidance, just like today, man. Therefore, although Lao Tse was meeting with great success in China, the teachings of Solon, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel appealed to but a few. Knowing it was useless as well as unsafe for the heirs of David to remain in Palestine after rescuing the sacred national treasure from the temple, including the stone of Israel, we're talking about Jacob's pillow. Now, when they say in Palestine and Egypt, guys, remember, these were probably in different places in these ancient times, not where they are today. That wasn't the real Jerusalem, guys. That Palestine, that's not the real Jerusalem, guys. That's not the real Holy Land. So after rescuing all these, you're talking about the Ark of the Covenant, we're talking about Jacob's pillow or the stone of Israel, which became the coronation stone of Europe, right? Said to have been bequeathed to the care of Joseph by Abraham. He left the captives in Babylonia to the ministrations of the fiery Ezekiel, and proceeded with his wars to Iberia. Iberia, right? Spain, Portugal. Accordingly, from an old Spanish record, it appears that two Eastern princesses, right, accompanied by an ancient prophet and being his scribe, right, Baruch, bearing with them a sacred stone, a box which may have been the ark, and a golden banner, arrived on the shores of Spain. All right, we got the whole backstory to this in many different books. Here, the younger princess appears to have married the ruler of Gaza, okay, Gaza, the Hebraic colony of Saragossa, literally with my father's last name, my paternal last name originates, which is Salazar, right? So you go to the history of that, and it becomes Sarasa, which is Saragaza, which is from Saragossa. The line is, you get it. So anyway, Sarah, right, from the tribe of Judah. Sarah was the son of Judah. So they're hooking up with these people in Spain too, right? So thus the purpose of Jeremiah in marrying off one of the heiresses of David. So listen, the daughters of Zedekiah, the survivors from the line of Pharez, which was just women, the males got killed on that line. They all got killed, guys. It's in the Bible. They were able to marry a male from the tribe of Judah still, but from the line of Sarah. You guys remember, right? So it was still reestablished. Both Judah lines became one. The twins, that separation they had for all these thousands of years, it was done. They united the two lines of Judah. And they say they did that in Spain, right? An Iberian in Spain. He meant to establish Israel at the Pillars of Hercules so that the Saragossans and Phoenicians, Israelites of Cadiz, might both be beyond the control of Rome. Carthage and Marseilles, just as might have been expected by him, Iberia became an asylum for all that was best in Israel. But the old prophet also knew the strategic importance to Israel of Ireland, Chaldea, Britain, and Scandinavia. Therefore, with Baruch and Tamar Tephi, with who? With Tephi, Queen Tephi, one of the daughters of Zedekiah, of the line of Pharez of Judah, descendant of David. Tamar Tephi, Queen Tephi of Ireland. It's not a myth, it's a real person. Jeremiah and Baruch, they ended up there, right? The older princes of Judah, Tamar Tephi, he proceeded northward from Balboa, with the alleged intention of extending his mission to the Scandinavian Israelites and Denmark, to the brethren, to the other Israelites who already were in Denmark or Dansmark, the Danites and all these other people. You see? They were scattered, right? Scattered across the whole world, right? The mark of Dan, Dansmark, Denmark, Dansmark. Utah, literally, a place called there, Utah. Uten people. They want us to think these are all blonde, blue-eyed people, guys. Like, they had nothing to do with Israel. They have done a number on us with history, trust me. So he wanted to extend the mission all the way to those people, right? A shipwreck, we are told, cast them upon the north coast of Ulster, right? Ulster plantation, that's where they planted the seed. The kingdom, plantation, that's where that comes from. If you're Irish, you know what I'm talking about. Tamar, right? The hill of Tamar. So they ended up in Ulster in Ireland, over which Eochaid, a prince of Judah, through the line of Sarah, remember, recently had been elected Bermeo, or crowned horseman of the whole island. Wow, crowned horseman. And was awaiting his coronation when he met the voyagers, at once fell in love with Tamar Tephi. You see, that's the two lines of Judah coming together. It's beautiful. Two lines of Judah, the two brothers through Pharez and Sarah, eventually their descendants, Tamar and Eochaid. We got both their genealogies. We've done it. It came together. The two lines came together, reestablishing Judah. and was quickly married to her, whereupon they were crowned standing on Liaphel, right? The stone of destiny. They were crowned on Jacob's pillow. I told you that became the coronation stone. Till this day, guys, till this day. This is real deep information that most people have no clue about. They don't understand what we even talking about. They don't see how important this is to know. They don't realize, guys. They still use these coronation stones in their little ceremonies and stuff. They still, the bastard kids, yeah, they still carrying some of the blood, and they're until different, until we, until the real one wake up. Therefore, the story of the shipwreck may be discarded. The story also has it that unhappily Queen Teffy did not long survive her marriage, that the grief-stricken king of Ireland erected over her remains the mount today known to the Hebrews as Great Merchesh, and to the Irish as the Hill of Tara. All right? Torah, Tara, the law. You see? They build a mound. She got buried in a mound. So the Israelites build a mound, right? So Israelites build mounds, right? Israelites build mounds, right? That's what is there. She is buried there in Ireland today. You guys know what I'm talking about if you're from there. You've heard of the Hill of Tara, right? Well, Teffy's there. That's the daughter of Zedekiah. These are real people, not myth, not biblical stories, not just symbolic. The Bible's not symbolic. All you guys just be listening to me, sending me your books and all this other stuff, and literally, like, I see it as hijack. I'm trying to prove the Bible ain't real. Like, there's not historical people in it too. I know it's symbolic, or both things are real. That's how mysterious Most High is. But you want to discredit the Most High, you're on that hijack. That's why you got no wisdom, because you fear the wrong things. Proverbs 1:7. Okay, let's keep going. Where every succeeding king of Ireland, right? Listen, where every succeeding king of Ireland is said to have been crowned down to the reign of Fergus I. We've broken this down. From there, moved to Scotland, right? Of this mythical relic, Dean Stanley wrote, it is the one primal monument which binds together the whole empire. As the more learned Hebrews understood the word empire, here implied the universal Israel. That's what really empire is supposed to mean. The universal Israel. Of which Jeremiah had uttered the prophecy. His reference to the pyramids of Egypt and the things of the witness, right? Of the future leaves no doubt that he was entirely familiar with their history. Did Jeremiah visit Denmark or Denmark? We only know that his death in 582 BC concurred with another event of great importance in the history of America. What? The birth of Pythagoras. They're saying Pythagoras was born in America. Look, I can't make this up. He said Pythagoras was born in America. The pupil of Thales, who like Solon was one of the 7 wise men, and to repeat was credited with inventing the theodolite, as well as calculating various eclipses. Pythagoras also had come under the tutelage of the Gymnosos at Benares, when Prince Siddhapatha, known to the Hindus as Gautama Buddha. All right, so one day we're gonna do it thoroughly, like we're gonna break all this down when it comes to Buddha. We on your ass, Gautama Buddha, Guatemala Maya. Your mom is Maya, huh? Prince Siddhapatha, huh? He came under the tutelage of Gautama Buddha, and the Buddhist as the 9th avatar. Was born somewhere between 562 and 552 BC, just about the time of Confucius was also born. Are they duplicating people? What's going on here? Lao Tse, Ezekiel, Thales, Pythagoras, Gautama, or Guatemala, Confucius, all contemporaries. Supposedly, right? These are all contemporaries. And yet in the ordinary Western history of Pythagoras and the grand scripture of the East are hardly mentioned. Wow, that's true. But are they the same person, though? Are they the same person if they're all contemporary? Had they been duplicated? Just after the Pythagoras attained his majority and Confucius saw the light of day, Croesus of Lydia, who is said to have introduced the use of gold coins, ascended the throne 560 BC, reverenced by the Ionians and Greeks above any god or philosophy because he was supposed to be the richest king in the world. He was wont to boast of the power his wealth gave him. Money Mayweather sounds like Money Mayweather. Nor does the archaeology of Miletus leave room to doubt whence his wealth was coming. Already, we have seen that during the confusion of tongues, the Lydians, represented by the mythical King Lud, Lydians descend from Lud, guys. The Lydians, Northern Africa, they descend from Lud, so-called Greeks too. Represented by the mythical King Lud, he's not a myth. That's one of the sons of Shem. They named London after him, right? Had founded London. Look. So, by the time of the confusion of the tongues, the Lydians represented the mythical King Lud had founded London. Lydians in London. Lydians, right? Supposed to be North. Lydians in London. Londonderry, and the shrine of Iona of the coast of Scotland. Mathematical analysis of the Temple of Jupiter, Didymaus and Miletus affords conclusive proof of the geographical knowledge of the Lydians. Thus, it marks exactly the meridian of Spitzbergen and the latitude of Piraeus, the port of Athens, Mount Etna in Sicily, and Seville in Spain. Upon the golden coins of the Phoenicians, Astarte, the goddess of love, appears at the bow of a great ship holding the arm's length a true cross as the guide of the helmsman. The finding of the shekels of Israel in the placer fields of Michigan. Listen, guys. Look, listen to what they just said. Wow. The finding of the shekels of Israel in the placer fields of Michigan and at Chichen Itza have been reported. 71. We're going to get to this. Goodrich, Columbus, 10 Tribes of Israel, Jenkins. Oh, yeah. Okay, I think we have gone this. I think we definitely have read Jenkins one. That's literally a book we're reading recently. Last couple, in the last year we read it mad times. So Goodrich, Columbus, how are we gonna get that one as well? See what they're finding? We're gonna get all the drop. The drop don't stop, man. They found what? The shekels of Israel here in Michigan, Michigan, where there's copper missing, right? Copper missing, and Chichen Itza have been reported. Also, it is especially significant that above an arch of the Temple of Janus, this is so crazy because, like when we talk about the Tower of Belus, the Pyramid of Cholula. So then we got the Temple of Janus, which had become the official mint of Rome. Appears Poseidon, the mythical founder of the Atlantean kingdom, driving his horse-drawn chariot through the waves from the west. While the first gold coins issued from this temple display a great ship with spread sails staring toward the setting sun. In addition to all this, a mass of evidence has been produced to show that the Carthaginians were visiting America by way of the Azores. Again, seeing it in reverse. Where are they coming out of the Americas? We have a Cartagena, which is one of the cities in Colombia. We have a Cartago, which used to be the old capital of Costa Rica. Cartago is literally Carthage in Spanish. Cartagena and Cartago is Carthage. Remember that Cartagena and Colombia is an old ancient town that the Indians had already. So they're saying the Carthaginians were here. Yeah, we got this drop a lot. Like, yeah, well, you're seeing it in reverse. And only lately it has been claimed they built a city recently discovered near Palenque. You see? Oh, so now the Carthaginians built a city near Palenque, right? That's why, like I said, they were from here. Where stood the Temple of the Cross, right, in Palenque. So you're saying Carthaginians built Palenque, huh? So who are the Carthaginians? I thought Palenque was built by Mayans and Toltecs. It is useless, therefore, to ignore the proof afforded by the charts that when Solon died in 537 or 57 BC, the Carthaginians and Phoenicians, as well as the Pirati, and Greeks were visiting America, all right? So-called Greeks, so-called Phoenicians, so-called Carthaginians, so-called Pirati, right? Seafaring peoples, obviously. Seafaring started here, obviously. We already got the drop from the most famous historian on navigation. He said if anybody was to cross the Atlantic first, it would be from the American side. That's from the most famous historian on navigation. It's twice, no, I'm sorry. It's 4 times harder coming the other way around. It's much easier going from the Americas to that side. We got the currents and the winds to our back more favorable. All right, so you guys read between the lines what they're telling you here, right? That's why I say who's the so-called Greeks. To be sure, the Greeks had turned against Solon and enthroned the tyrant Pisistratus before the former's death. Nevertheless, again, Solon had manifested his wisdom by the warning he had given Croesus, the Ionians and Greeks. He that has the strongest sword will take it all, said the founder of the Greek Republic, referring to the fabulous wealth of the Lydians. Within 2 years after his death, Cyrus the Great, Cyrus, modern day, had unsheathed the sword of Damocles. Although Pythagoras was immensely wise, it took more than this adept of the Pythian mysteries to reform the worshippers of the golden calf in Greece, who had reinvoked the Homeric poems, wherein the conquests of Agamemnon, Achilles, Ajax, and other champions of the sword had been glorified. Already, therefore, Pythagoras and his Masonic philosophy, Hermetics, based on 5 fundamental symbols of the wisdom philosophy, the dot, circle, square, triangle, and pentagon, had been rejected, and he had been compelled to leave Greece, all right? The Hermetics, they kicked that out. When the Greeks, ignoring God's house, turned to the conquest of Thrace and Chersonesus. Now too, like the Lydians, they adopted the forbidden institution of slavery. Therefore, in 546 BC, about the time Gautama, or Buddha, right, Guatemala, and Confucius, the pupil of Lao Tse, began their teachings, the Persians under Cyrus, fulfilling the prophecy of Solon, overthrew Croesus and cut the Greeks off from the entrepots of the Black Sea. While Cyrus knew what was pointed out by 2 great Americans in a later age, capturing the cesspool of Babylon in 538 BC, within a year he permitted the Hebrews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their city. So again, after 15 years of captivity under the ministrations of Ezekiel, they had regained their freedom and were rebuilding the temple, when in 529 BC, in fulfillment of the prophecy of Jeremiah, the great ruler of Persia was slain by the rebellious Masa-Hetai. Remember, these people had relations with the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Meantime, in order to recover the trade of the Mediterranean, Sesostris had allowed the tyrants of Greece to establish a commercial base at Ankratis, on the delta, from which they had soon extended their sway over Cyrene. The great ship of Amnon that traded back and forth between Sais and the Mediterranean ports during the latter part of the 26th dynasty was but a sample of the seagoing craft possessed by the Egyptians when in 529 BC, the years Cyrus perished, his successor Cambyses III invaded Egypt to down Sesostris again. The relatively large amount of Mediterranean blood which the peoples of southern and western Europe had absorbed inevitably had distinguished them from the Scandinavian Germanic Teutons. All right, so this part, I know what they're trying to say. They call them Mediterranean blood dark-skinned people, assuming that all these dark-skinned people just came out of the Mediterranean, meaning North Africa, right? A lot of these people they mentioned today, guys, Phoenicians, all these people, a lot of it came from the ancient Americas. So it has nothing to do with coming out of Africa, first of all. And if you're talking about Scandinavian, Germanic, which ones? You just literally were saying earlier, right? Denmark and all these, who's the Scythians, who's the Sac? We already know the whole drop. Don't think white versus black. So if we're gonna go with what he's saying, we just mean the separation of cultures, not by color. Since the appearance of the Hallstatt culture among the Germans, the latter had misinterpreted the symbolisms of the flaming sword. I literally just showed you the painting of the son of Peter the Great, right? I've shown you the family crest of these Germanic Roman clergy families. Like I've shown you all this, right? Like I'm not just making this up, right? I mean, Benjamin Franklin literally said that the Germans were so swarthy. Why are we going to Germanize America with people that don't look like us? Huh? Dark-skinned, swarthy people, right? So I'm not making things up just in case somebody don't understand what we're saying here. So anyways, let's keep going. Since the appearance of the Hallstatt culture among the Germans, the latter had misinterpreted the symbolism of the flaming sword, taught by the Hermans, to whom they owed their name, to look upon themselves as the Herren Volk, or chosen of God, superior to all others, and therefore entitled to rule the earth. The sword, in its physical sense, had become their one god. In other words, the blonde beast of Nietzschean philosophy, back to which traces the present Nazi cult, had already appeared. In Mont Blanc, the Jungfrau, Mount Albano, and the geographic figure of the Celtic man, they too saw symbols of the white race, of which, again, that's why I knew he was going with this. I knew that's where he was trying to bring this. That's why I said, touch the hijack, which less Mediterranean blood. See, now he's saying Mediterranean means black, like I said. He's trying to say that's what, you know, they're trying to say, oh, everybody that's in Europe that has black, probably Mediterranean. Nope. We already debunked all this, right? We know the first Europeans, what they look like, right? He literally said earlier that these people were dark skinned. These remember these darker. He literally admitted that, right? Anyways, and of course he's probably thinking Israeli means white, right? Like that's like all these authors. Of course they're gonna make Semitic people all so-called white. So yeah. Anyways, so but for them, the figure of Gaul was that of Hercules, the warrior of Wodan or Wotan. Meantime, the Getae, who had evolved from the deported tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, okay, had been driven into Dacis, where, according to the prophecy in Micah 2, 12, they were to grow in strength and fitness, despite their heavy chastisement by the Assyrians, Scythians, and Greeks. Nevertheless, to the north of them in Scythia were the no less degenerate Massagetæ, who, under pressure from the Scythians in the north and east, and the Greeks and Persians in the south, had trekked to Danube, whence they were driven northward, coming at last to Denmark, right? Here for centuries they were to remain mingling with the Pirati and Cimbris, with the Danites and the Cimmerians, to furnish the ancestors of the Scandinavians and the Normans. Okay. So that doesn't mean white. None of that isn't to me. With a ceaseless strife going on between the Herrenvolk, who meant to rule Europe, and the other peoples of Gaul. The task of Pontifex Maximus and the priesthood of Rome was to establish peace. Therefore, the task of Pythagoras as the Christos of the Pythian mysteries was to reform Druidism and make of it the potent force of law and order which it had become before his death in 500 BC. Consequently, from that time on, the Druids were in no sense priests, but merely a secret fraternity of wise men, especially erudite in geography and the sciences, through whom the Masonic principle of the true cross, symbolized by their sacred trees and the zodiacal circles, was imparted to the three parts of Gaul. All right, that might include Samhain a little bit right there, right? Yeah. It says here, number 83 in the bottom, because their names had changed from Israelites to Masajate. According to Deuteronomy, God caused the memory of them to cease among men. Wow. Whoa, and I believe, yep, the end of the chapter, guys. That's the end of chapter 9. All right. I'd like to go ahead and remind you what book we were reading in case you arrive late, you don't know what we're reading. And, this was the book America, the Background of Columbus. Oh, come on. So America, the Background of Columbus. being a survey of the revelations of science with respect to the Western Hemisphere and its peoples before its unveiling by Columbus, by Jenon C. Wise. All right. And again, where do we have? I still got it up. Let me see. We got the whole playlist for you. Every chapter, if you missed it, right here. If you go to my playlist tab on my main channel, you guys see, you got a playlist tab right here. My live videos, like this one. A lot of you guys don't know, you go to videos and you don't see my live videos. You're like, I don't see it, and you think I only upload. No, I upload almost every day, guys. So go to my lives tab for my live videos, like today's, right? You see, that's today's. And then you got regular videos, which I just upload in Premiere or whatever, right? They're not live. And then you got my playlist, which I created, certain topics. So again, this is the one, America being a survey of the revelations of science. So the name of the book, right? And all the previous chapters, all right? Including today's, as you guys see. Including today's, right? Yeah, we got a lot of drop. We got a lot of good drop on different books too. One of my favorites, I got a lot of favorites actually. Oh yeah, I got Mysteries of Ancient South America, Research into the Lost History, Ancient and Modern Britons. When we talking about Black Danites, we ain't making this up. So Research into the Lost History of America. If you missed this, wow, like we read this about a year ago. Now the whole book, every chapter, this was good. This goes so well with this book. So, go ahead and reference that. Okay. All right. Guys. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm gonna go ahead and end it right there. Thank you for coming through. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Thank you, everybody for being respectful and everything. I didn't see no hijacks. I think I didn't. So I appreciate that. Shout out again to everybody who came through and read the whole book with me live. All the way from the beginning to the end, man. I appreciate you guys. Check out my Patreon. I have this book there on my Patreon page. I have many of the books I read there on my Patreon page if you want to support what I do. And yeah, thank you for those who are already supporting. Appreciate you guys. All right, I'm out. A lot of drop. All right, that was a lot of good drop. We're gonna put together with all the other drop and just put the pieces together, man. All right. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.